I have not had much luck with airsoft sniper rifles. The Tokamarui L96 is a beautiful piece of engineering, but the part compatibility, I mean there's spacecraft which are probably less proprietary than that thing, and it's not the best thing to take to bits either. And the JG Bar 10 was a knackered old thing that was one disassembly away from crumbling into dust. And the ASG M40A3 Sportline had the upgradeability of a paving slab. The M40A3 was intended to be a cheap build, as I tried to make a monster of a rifle for as cheap as possible. But it's not easy building a sniper rifle on the cheap, and more often than not, if you go really cheap, it will just end up pissing you off. Yes, it was cheap, but at a cost. Now over this year I've had a good go with the Action Army AAP01 and I absolutely love it. And my ears pricked up when the old man mentioned the Action Army T11. I mean, I thought if the AAP is anything to go by, the T11 will be very easy to work on and there'll be a good chance that I wouldn't need to do much to it either. But even if I did need to do something to it, the T11 is completely VSR compatible. And it just so happens that Action Army also sell arguably one of the best hop units for the VSR10. The external build quality of the T11 is very impressive. Granted, this one needs a bit of a clean, but the finish on it is brilliant, and much like the Double Eagle UMP45 I looked at a while back, the build quality rivals replicas which cost significantly more. The weight is about what you'd expect. It doesn't weigh as much as a collapsed star, but it doesn't feel like a cheap toy. And surprisingly, I've never weighed this before, it weighs 3.5 kilos, kitted out as it is, which is about 7.8 pounds. And the length of the T11 is round about 110 centimetres, just about 43 inches. So the length of it isn't anything unusual either. And you can actually get a sawn-off variant, which I really don't see the point of, but I'll get into that later. The muzzle end of the rifle features a female thread, so you're going to need an adapter to fit 14mm accessories onto it. It's a bit annoying, but name me one airsoft sniper rifle that has a 14mm thread out of the box. This, I reckon, is a G-Spec style suppressor thread, but in my case, I just use my OBAS. And on the underside, you have a small segment of rail, which in this case, I've mounted a bipod onto it. And just behind it, we have a QD sling mount hole. Now, I thought I wouldn't like the placement of that sling mount, but it works quite well. And if I put a double point sling on it and loop the other end through this sling mount here, that seems to work quite well. The magwell is the typical VSR10 layout, and the mags fit in and eject cleanly. I don't particularly like the VSR mag setup, but in this case it functions fine. And then behind it we have another mag here, with the magazine release being an AK style paddle mag release. And this is actually a toolkit. If you pull the base plate off and swing it open, you have some Allen keys and some other space to chuck in some other bits and bobs. Now, what I dislike more than silly VSR mags is a fake mag that does nothing. But that being said, it definitely adds to the look of the rifle, and I will say the T11 I originally didn't particularly like the look of. I just bought it because of it being an Action Army VSR10, being easy to work on and being a nice solid build platform. But the look of it is definitely growing on me. Although I will say I've also instinctively pulled out the wrong mag more times than I would like to admit. The hop adjuster is usually located here. It's one of those little slidey arms, but I've recently installed a red Action Army hop unit, which is adjusted via a grub screw accessed within the magwell. And everyone of course has recommended to me that I TDC it, but I don't really want to TDC it if I can help it, as I quite like the look of this rifle without a TDC turret sticking out of it. And so far I think a TDC is unnecessary. The Action Army hop unit combined with a Sniper Mechanics 60-degree Flamingo bucking and a STALKER Panthera nub allows this rifle to lift just about any round you fire through it. Seriously, it does not take much adjustment to end up with some significant overhop. And I've also replaced the stock barrel with an Action Army 601mm tightbore. This helps increase the velocity because of the better seal and also flatten the trajectory of the pellet. As for the power source, this is obviously a HPA rifle. Inside this T11 is my Sabre VSR10 HPA engine. And yes, out of the box, this has a 90-degree setup inside, but the velocity is pitiful without any upgrades. I didn't even try to use it stock. And the certificate that came with it, I believe it said it was under 300 FPS with a 0.2. So that is not, you just know. Even if you're playing in like Ireland or Italy where it's 1 joule, or Japan, you're just going to get your ass handed to you. Holy shit. The Sabre, of course, solves that issue. And when I first installed the Sabre in this rifle, I tried it with the stock hop unit and an MR hop bucking, and I did manage to exceed 500 FPS. But since the new hop setup is even more efficient, as it's more grippy and it requires less hop pressure to lift the pellet, you get a bit less back pressure, so therefore less jaw creep. So right now, with a 4mm airline plugging into this rifle, it does about 430 FPS equivalent at approximately 150 PSI with 0.4 freeze. And I do want to get a bigger airline at some point because the 4mm fittings and pipe are really what's throttling it. I could also use heavier rounds too for more dual creep, but right now I don't think that's too important, as this rifle is already knocking on the door of 100 meters. When I first sabred the T11, I also chucked in the Maple Leaf MR hop bucking that I mentioned earlier, and other than that it was completely stock. And I stupidly didn't film this, but I had someone reach out to me with this thing at 110 paces, and not silly little paces, 110 strides. Granted, at the time there was a bit of overhop due to the detents in the slidey hop unit not allowing for fine enough adjustment, but 110 bloody paces, 110 strides, whilst firing at 70 FPS below the sniper rifle limit. That's over 100 meters. It's about 105 meters once you convert steps into meters. And you know what? The more I think about it, that might have been done with some leftover force. So with .43 you'd get even more power of it because of more dual creep, and of course they would have more momentum too. And I was still visible on the scope, albeit right at the bottom of it, but 100 plus out of a pretty cheap rifle build is incredible. And recently I tested this again, or more accurately, I was used as a target again, but this was after it was fully upgraded and annoyingly on an incredibly windy day. In fact, I had a very strong and unpredictable wind to my back that would have blown right in the face of the shooter.
Give it some height! Might give it more height! Hit! One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47, 48, 49, 50, 50, before going in the ditch, 51, 52, 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, 66, 67, 68, 69, 70, 71, 72, 73, 74, 75, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86, holy shit, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96.
96.
And that's the headwind up there is incredible. So I'm surprised you even got. That's what I was trying to show. Like there's so much wind.
I was doing on about the second to third one from the bottom.
Again, this is 70 FPS below the bolt action limit, and there wasn't as much overhop as the previous setup. It's even below the DMR limit. The DMR limit at my local site is 450. This is doing 430. And I reckon without that headwind, we would have hit 100 plus meters again. And this time it would have been a lot more consistent thanks to the upgrades to the hop and the barrel. The Sabre requires a 11.1 volt LiPo to power it, which I install in the rear here once I remove these two bolts and take the butt plate off. Not only does the Sabre reduce the physical stress on the gun as well as making it a lot easier to adjust your velocity, it also makes cycling a bolt a lot easier. And when combined with a good foam-filled airsoft suppressor like this OBAS here, this T11 becomes probably the quietest airsoft gun I have ever heard, especially given the frankly monstrous range of this thing. And at the last few events that I tried this, the weather was so bad, it was so windy, you would not be able to hear this outside of the minimum engagement distance. And even then I reckon you probably wouldn't be able to hear it from more than a few meters away. Unfortunately, I haven't had the best days on the field to show this off at its absolute best. Aside from the insane wind during the last few events I've used this thing, which didn't seem to stop me doing better than usual, it must be said. I also had issues with ammunition. Now beforehand, I rarely, if ever, used to wash ammo for airsoft, but the Blitz Bio .43s that I've been using left a load of white dust inside the bucking and parts of the barrel. And what happened is this rifle, when I first tested it, was an absolute machine. It was incredible. It was a scythe. But as more and more rounds went through it, the accuracy and consistency absolutely plummeted. And at one point it became next to useless. So you had no real benefit of range or accuracy. Yes, it shot a bit further, but it was so inconsistent. But after that event, I then discovered the deposits being left inside the gun, and I then washed the pellets in an ultrasonic cleaner. And aside from the deviation in the ridiculous winds, I didn't see any evidence to suggest that this problem has resurfaced.
Fucking hell.
Now, of course, this is not the stock performance of the Action Army T11, but you don't buy a VSR10 to use stock. You just don't. These things are for upgrading and fiddling with. That's what you have to do with VSRs. You can't use them out of the box. The Tokimori VSR10, if you try to use it out of the box, especially here in the UK where it can go up to 500 FPS, we're not talking about like the 1 joule limits across everything. If you try and use a VSR10 out of the box here, you are going to get absolutely mauled alive by basically everyone, including rentals. These things are for upgrading and fiddling with, and I'd argue that this T11 is right up there in regards to that. Aside from being made by the company who makes some of the best VSR10 upgrade parts in the world, this rifle is designed to be dismantled. All of the screw holes are properly threaded, the screws are all Allen heads, so they're harder to chew up and round off like Phillips screws. It's been apart quite a few times and it feels just as solid as when I first pulled it out of its packaging. And on the optic rail on the top, I've got a 3 to 9 times by 40mm scope, a little mount here for my scope cam, as well as a laser rangefinder. And whilst this is for another video, I want to say this has proven to me that, as I've said before, Google Maps is perfectly accurate enough for airsoft, and anyone who tells you that it's not is talking out of their arse. Now, I mentioned earlier that you can get a sawn-off variant of the T11, and I see that as a complete waste of time. The idea is that you can have it slung on your back as a backup sniper rifle, to deal with those targets who you just cannot reach with your AR or whatever primary you're running with. But the fact is, the sawn-off variant is not going to be as good of a performer as the full-length T11. It's just not. I mean, the shorter barrel will reduce your accuracy and velocity, you'll get less dual creep and all that, and the lack of the stock won't help either, because you won't be able to brace it and hold it still. And I'd be willing to bet that a decently upgraded airsoft assault rifle would be far more effective than carrying a sawn-off bolt action, all the while not taking up more space or requiring different mags and ammo. If you want to snipe, do it properly or don't bother. Don't try and do this pseudo sniper build where you're running around with like an M16 and then a small sniper rifle. Do it properly or don't bother. It will just irritate you otherwise. But back to this T11. So far, I am very impressed with this rifle. Barring any serious anomalies, I would definitely recommend this as a base rifle for a VSR10 airsoft sniper build. And with my Sabre HPA engine inside, this rifle is a silent scythe with plenty more performance to come. If you like this video or found it helpful at any point, then please make sure you leave a like. And if you want to support what I do, then make sure you check out fulcrumairsoft.com and Fulcrum Airsoft on Colts 3D. And if you want to be part of the channel, then please make sure you subscribe too. We're nearly at 10k. It is incredible. I'm blown away by it as usual. Thank you very much for your continued support. And if you want to see this rifle in action against the gale force winds from Storm Bert, then make sure you check that out right here.